I wasn't even supposed to be awake. It was a Tuesday, a school night, and my dad would have absolutely lost it if he knew I was still staring at my phone at 2 a.m. But the air in my room felt thick and itchy, like a fever was coming on. I needed water. The house was hauntingly quiet. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy kind, the kind that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. I crept into the kitchen, and the floorboard shrieked under my heel. I froze, held my breath, then reached for a glass. As the tap ran, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like a ghost of myself. Then I heard it, a crunch in the gravel outside. Then another. Then a steady, rhythmic thud. I stopped mid-sip. Raccoons don't walk with that kind of weight. Deer don't have that cadence. This was a human stride. I flicked off the small stove light so I wouldn't be a target, then eased the blinds up with 2 fingers. My heart did a slow, painful roll in my chest. It was Caleb. He was barefoot, walking toward the thick line of trees behind my backyard. He moved with a terrifying kind of purpose, like there was an invisible rope tied to his chest, pulling him into the dark. His arms hung dead at his sides. His head was perfectly level, not looking left or right. It was freezing outside. I could see my own breath fogging the glass, but Caleb wasn't wearing a jacket. He wasn't even shivering. He just drifted, smooth, silent, like he'd practiced this walk 1,000 times in his sleep. "Caleb, what the hell are you doing?" I whispered to the glass. Obviously, he didn't hear me. He didn't even blink. Driven by some stupid impulse, I stepped out onto the back porch. The freezing cement bit into my bare feet. "Caleb?" I called out, louder this time. "Dude, you okay?" Nothing. Not a flinch. He reached the shadow of the pines and simply vanished into the blackness. I stood there for what felt like an hour, shivering, waiting for him to walk back out. He never did. I went back inside, locked the door twice, and lay in bed watching the moonlight crawl across the ceiling until it turned into gray morning light. I felt sick, like I'd looked at something the universe hadn't finished building yet. By the time I dragged myself to school, I felt like a wreck. My brain was looping the image of those bare feet in the frozen grass. I walked into first period, and my heart nearly stopped. Caleb was already there, sitting in his usual spot. His hoodie was spotless. His hair was perfectly styled. He was leaning over a worksheet, wearing a calm, pleasant smile, like he was actually happy to be at school at 8 a.m. "Yo," I whispered, sliding into the desk next to him. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Where'd you go last night, man?" Caleb looked up. The expression on his face was unnerving. Usually, Caleb is a ball of nervous energy, tapping his pencil, bouncing his leg, cracking dumb jokes to fill the silence. But this version of him was perfectly still. He blinked once, a slow, deliberate movement that didn't look human. "What do you mean?" he asked. His voice was smooth, like a polished stone. "I went to bed early." "You were outside my house," I hissed, leaning in, barefoot. In the grass, it was 2 a.m. He tilted his head slightly, like a confused dog. "I wasn't anywhere near your place, Leo." He said it so logically, so politely, that for a second I actually doubted my own eyes. Maybe I was dreaming? I thought. But the weirdness was just getting started. At lunch, I saw Chloe. Everyone knows Chloe has a severe strawberry allergy, the kind where she has to carry 2 EpiPens just to feel safe. I watched her sit down with a yogurt cup filled with bright red chunks. Her friend leaned away, eyes wide. "Chloe, wait, isn't that dangerous for you?" Chloe just smiled, a distant, empty look in her eyes. "Are you calling me fat, you bitch?" She said it like a joke, but she had never made a joke like that in her life. She was always the shy, quiet type. Then, she took a huge spoonful of the yogurt and swallowed it. No swelling, no gasping, nothing. By third period, I was spiraling. Our math teacher, Mrs. Gable, gave a 20-minute lecture on linear equations without blinking, not once. I stared at her eyes until mine began to water. They stayed dry and glass-like, staring at the back of the room while her mouth moved independently. By the final bell, I felt like my brain was unspooling. My shirt felt too tight. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept thinking about Caleb disappearing into the woods and coming back out as if someone had pressed reset on his soul. What the hell is happening? I whispered to myself in the hallway. For the first time in my life, I was terrified to go home. I eventually fell asleep, but it was that thin, jagged sleep where every sound makes you jump. When I woke up, the sun was cutting through my blinds in soft yellow bars. For a minute, I almost convinced myself I was just being dramatic. Maybe I was just exhausted. But then I remembered the way Caleb's bare feet looked in the moonlight. I remembered Mrs. Gable's unblinking eyes. The truth was sitting in my chest like a lead weight. I couldn't just sit in my room scrolling through TikTok and pretending the world wasn't breaking. I needed to know where that path in the woods led. I got dressed, pulled my hoodie tight, and headed back into the woods. Not the trail behind my house. I couldn't risk seeing Caleb again. I went the long way, past the rusted creek and deep beyond the hiking trails. The further I walked, the more the forest felt corrupt. It was dead quiet. No birds chirping, no squirrels rustling in the leaves, just the sound of my own jagged breathing and the wind whistling through skeletal branches. About 2 miles in, I saw it, an old barn, leaning to one side as if it were too tired to stand. The red paint was peeling like sunburnt skin, and the metal roof was a jagged sheet of rust. It looked abandoned for decades, but I felt a pull, a sick, magnetic tug in my stomach dragging me toward it, step by step. I pushed the door. It groaned, a long, slow warning. Inside, the air hit me like a physical blow. It smelled of dust, mold, and something else. Something sweet and putrid, the smell of raw meat left to rot in a closed car. The floorboards shrieked under my sneakers. Shafts of light poked through holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My foot hit a loose plank. It shifted, and the stench doubled in intensity. I knelt down, my heart screaming stop, and pried the wood up with my fingers. It snapped easily, like it had been opened recently. I lifted the board, and I saw faces. My hand shook, hitting the metal trough with a tiny ding. The man's head snapped in my direction. We made eye contact for a split second. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Then he pressed the barrel to his temple and pulled the trigger. My ears rang. I jammed my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming, but the horror was only beginning. The man's corpse began to twitch, slowly at first, then violently. Something was waking up inside him. His chest expanded unnaturally, stretching the skin until it looked translucent. His stomach began to bulge. Then, a mass, black, wet, and pulsating like an exposed heart, pushed its way up through his throat. It tore through the wound in his skull, oozing out of his mouth and eyes, ripping the sockets apart. I gagged into my palms. The mass grew, shifting and hardening. I heard the sickening snap, snap, snap of bones forming and locking into place. Skin stretched over the new frame. Hair sprouted in seconds. Standing over the dead man was a perfect duplicate of him. Same height, same face, same clothes, except for the eyes. These eyes were too clean, too still. Like a doll's eyes. With mechanical calm, the copy wiped a smear of blood from its cheek. It undressed the corpse, putting the bloody clothes onto its own new body. Then it grabbed the original by the wrists and dragged him to the hole, shoving him down next to Caleb and Chloe. It pressed the plank back into place, straightened its shirt, and walked out of the barn with a smooth, practiced stride. No nerves, no rush, just a machine going to work. I stayed hidden long after the footsteps faded, my teeth clicking together from the cold and the terror. The world I knew was gone. Something is replacing us. I'm posting this because I need to know, is it just my town? If you can see this, tell me. I'm scared that by the time you read this, the person sitting next to you might not be who you think they are.